Welcome to the Revolutionary Review. Today, in honor of St. Patrick's Day, we will look at the St. Patrick's Battalion, also known as the San Patricios. The St. Patrick's Battalion was one of the toughest and bravest artillery battalions to ever have taken the field in military history. In the face of certain defeat, they refused to lay down their arms and fought on with such tenacity that their bravery is still celebrated today with a ceremonial parade in Mexico.
My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico.
The St. Patrick's Battalion was a United States Army regiment that was made up of recent European immigrants to the United States. The majority of these immigrants came from Ireland, hence the connection to the name St. Patrick. Many Irish immigrants had fled their home country following years of famine that had devastated the Irish countryside. This famine began in 1845 and would be known as the Great Hunger, or the Irish Potato Famine. This would see over 1 million Irish starve and another million flee the country. Many Irish immigrants were given empty promises of land and riches and were coerced into entering the U.S. Army. Having just escaped famine and starvation, many Irish had no other choice but to join the army. At this time, the U.S. was involved in a bitter struggle with Mexico over territory in what is now the American Southwest. The Republic of Texas had recently been annexed in 1845, following several armed conflicts, including the infamous Battle of the Alamo. After the U.S. forces were defeated at the Alamo, General Sam Houston would lead American forces in a daring charge against Mexican General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. This battle devastated the Mexican army and was a great victory for American forces, leading to the annexation of Texas. On the back of this victory, many expansionists argued for further encroachment into Mexican territory. James Polk, elected president in 1844, rose to power under the banner of American expansionism and quickly sought to stir up trouble along the U.S.-Mexican border. Polk was looking for any reason to declare war on Mexico, and in 1845, after the successful annexation of Texas, he would get that reason. Mexico refused to recognize the border claims of the U.S., as Americans claimed the border was the Rio Grande, but Mexico asserted that the border was the more northern Nueces River. This dispute allowed Polk to send in army troops under the guise of protecting the Texas border. However, these forces were meant to provoke the enemy into firing the first shot. The war officially began on April 25, 1846, and lasted until Mexico surrendered on February 2, 1848.
And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. And there amidst all these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side.
As stated, many Irish American soldiers were recent immigrants from Ireland, having fled to the U.S. following the potato famine. These were Catholics, as opposed to many American soldiers who were Protestants. American Protestants feared the influence of the Pope and refused to see Catholics as fellow Christians. They ridiculed and rejected Irish Catholic beliefs, while the Protestant churches either refused to administer or were refused by the Irish. Many Irish soldiers began to attend Catholic masses being held by Mexican priests, and this created a religious bond that would serve as a primary factor for their desertion from the U.S. Army. John Riley had immigrated from Ireland to Canada, and by the mid-1840s, he had joined the U.S. Army. He would write the most well-known folk song of the St. Patrick's Battalion. He describes the history of this brave band of Irishmen and their courageous deeds. Riley was given command of a regiment of Irishmen and was sent to Texas to join the war against Mexico. As Riley explains in the song, it was here that they realized the mistake they had made, part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. The fact that Mexico was Catholic and made up of a Hispanic people gave this war a religious and racial zeal. U.S. forces, who were mostly Protestant, engaged in atrocities from rape to murdering priests and children. Riley explains how we fought them in Matamoros, as their volunteers were raping the nuns. These instances of injustice pressed Riley and several hundred Irishmen to switch to the Mexican side. No longer could they watch fellow Catholics be slaughtered, raped, and abused at the hands of immoral brutes who had lost all sense of human decency. The St. Patrick's Battalion, or the San Patricios as they would be known in Mexico, deserted from the U.S. and joined the Mexican Army. Although most were Irish, many Germans, Poles, Canadians, and even freed slaves from the U.S. all fought under the flag of the Harp and the Shamrock to defend Mexico against the atrocities of the U.S. Army. Riley and many Irish initially deserted at Matamoros in 1846, but were soon followed by hundreds of sympathizers. The battalion would see its first military action at the Battle of Monterrey and would fight valiantly, single-handedly holding the heart of the city in the face of numerous assaults from the American forces. The San Patricios had pushed U.S. forces back, but the Mexican command decided it was best to fall back. Next, they would engage American forces at the Battle of Buena Vista, and by now the Mexican commanders realized that the San Patricios excelled in artillery warfare. They were given command of the largest cannons in the Mexican army, and devastated anyone who dared to challenge their position. Under the banner of Erin go Bragh, the San Patricios rained down death and destruction on American forces. After covering the Mexican army's advance, they decimated an opposing artillery position and then led a bayonet charge to take the cannons from the position they had just shelled to smithereens. They overran the already weakened American defenders and carried two 6-pound cannons that would later be used at the Battle of Contreras back with them. In response, the flustered American commander Zachary Taylor, who would later be elected president, ordered a squadron of his best troops, the 1st Dragoons, to take that damn battery. This battery was the artillery position being held by the San Patricios. The 1st Dragoons failed miserably and fell back after watching their forces literally get cut in half by flying balls of fiery fun. General Francisco Mieja's battle report for Buena Vista described the San Patricios as worthy of the most consummate praise because the men fought with daring bravery. For this daring bravery, several San Patricios were awarded the Mexican War Cross and were given promotions. From this day forward, the San Patricios would be seen as the most elite artillery troops in the whole of the Mexican army. Even though they fought bravely, the war was not going well for the Mexican army. As American gunships blew their way into the port of Veracruz in March of 1847, General William Scott prepared his land forces for an invasion of Mexico City. On their march to the Mexican capital, Scott ran into Santa Anna, who had fortified his position at Cerro Gordo. American forces were able to make their way through hidden chasms that enabled them to flank the Mexican forces. After failing to reinforce his surrounded army with fresh troops, Santa Anna fled. The U.S. Army captured close to 3,000 Mexican soldiers and 200 officers. This was a complete victory, and it gave American forces the upper hand in the war.
We marched march neath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin go Bragh. Bright with the harp and the shamrock, and Libertad para Republica. Just 50 years after Wolftone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. But from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in Matamoros, while their volunteers were reaping the nuns. In Monterrey and Cerro Gordo, we fought on as Ireland's sons. We were the red-headed fighters for freedom, amidst these brown-skinned women and men. Side by side we fought against tyranny, and I dare say we'd do it again.
Following the loss at Cerro Gordo, Santa Anna personally reorganized the San Patricios into infantry troops and renamed the company the Foreign Legion of Patricios. Mexican forces drafted handbills and desertion letters were drawn up targeting Catholic German, Polish, and Irish soldiers. These were secretly dispersed amongst the American forces and drew many sympathizers to their cause. The letters read, "You must not fight against a religious people, nor should you be seen in the ranks of those who proclaim slavery of mankind as a constitutive principle. Liberty is not on the part of those who desire to be lords of the world, robbing properties and territories which do not belong to them, and shedding so much blood in order to accomplish their views in open war to the principles of our holy religion." American forces under Scott continued their push towards Mexico City and eventually ran into the Mexican army near Contreras. Mexican forces under General Valencia did not fortify against an attack through the lava field at El Pedraga, as Valencia considered it impassable terrain. Scott ordered Robert E. Lee to build a road through El Pedragal to encircle the enemy, and they came under heavy fire on August 19, 1847. The battle initially was a great success for Valencia, as his superior fortifications and artillery positions allowed Mexican forces to rain down cannon and gunfire on the exposed American vanguard. Things quickly turned the following day, as American forces were able to fortify their position and move their artillery into firing range. On top of this, another hidden pass had been discovered that led American troops to the flank of the Mexican position. U.S. troops again surrounded Mexican forces and achieved an absolute victory. Santa Anna attempted to reorganize the retreating Mexican army and set up a defensive position along the Churubusco River. Churubusco would be the battle that would secure the San Patricios as some of the greatest heroes in North American history. American forces engaged what was left of the Mexican army at the Battle of Churubusco on August 20, 1847. The Mexican army was in shambles at this time, and not only were many soldiers injured, they also had very little supplies or ammunition. This did little to deter the San Patricios, who probably knew that surrendering could possibly lead to them being hanged as deserters by the U.S. Army. They were not about to lay down their arms to the tyranny that they had sworn to defend against. It is said that the Patricios targeted American officers during this battle and succeeded in killing many as payback for what they had done to the Irish and the Mexicans. The Mexican forces were fortified in two separate positions, one along the Tete de Pont and another in and around the convent of San Mateo. The convent had been fortified with trenches and stone walls. This is where the Patricios would make their final stand. General Perez was able to repulse two attempts by U.S. forces to overrun his position at the Tete de Pont, but the 8th and 5th Infantry were able to force his forces to retreat to the convent. Mexican forces were running out of ammo and losing artillery fast. Two cannons had melted while one had fallen off its mount. Many Mexican troops simply ran out of ammunition and were forced to surrender. William Jenkins Worth led U.S. troops across the Churubusco River and effectively dislodged the Mexican left. The only stronghold the Mexican army had at this point was the convent, but with so little supplies there was not much hope. After they ran out of bullets, the San Patricios held up their bayonets and continued to engage in hand-to-hand combat. Their Mexican compatriots repeatedly tried to raise a white flag for surrender, but each time the men of the St. Patrick's Battalion ripped it down. Once their last bullet was spent, the San Patricios finally surrendered, with some having escaped into Mexico City. Many others were captured by the Americans. Those who were captured were publicly executed in the largest mass execution in U.S. history, as 50 San Patricios were hanged by the U.S. Army for desertion. In 1997, on the 150th anniversary of the executions, then Mexican President Ernesto Zedillo stated, "Members of the St. Patrick's Battalion were executed for following their consciences. As they were martyred for adhering to the highest ideals, we honor their memory. In the name of the people of Mexico, I salute today the people of Ireland and express my eternal gratitude."
We fought them in 5 major battles. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside in the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side.